Hi guys and welcome. I'm Enigmius and this is episode 14, The Builder's Guide to Feed the Beast. Today we're talking about traffic control for minecarts. Now in the last couple of episodes we've been talking about using minecarts to shuttle materials back and forth across dimensional borders. You can see we've still got our little test carts happily running his circuit between here and our test world, off in the Mistcraft age that we created. And now I kind of want to talk about, I don't want to make it complicated, but at the same time, if all we're doing is using a very linear sort of track like that with, one drop off and one pickup, you can only use one minecart, which means you have to either add whole extra additional circuits with their own portals and their own return points, which quickly becomes unwieldy, and especially if you're talking about doing it on a server with that many portals just to manage a distribution network, you're probably not going to make too many friends, especially amongst the admins. So what we want to look at is just some pretty low-level traffic control so that we can, for example, have a single track for, covering distances, but then when it comes time to pick up and drop off, have that track split off into multiple different lanes so that you can have multiple carts operating without stumbling over one another, so to speak. So I've shown you this setup that I've got here previously, and I've put coke into the ovens just so that hopefully they're producing a moderate amount of creosote oil. Yeah, none at all. This, what the hell? Oh, I bet you it's because it's going down into the liquid loader. There it is. All right. Okay. I was concerned for a second there. So we've got creosote oil production going for demonstration purposes. This is all set up. There's really not a whole lot that I can do here, and I realized very, very quickly when I was planning this episode that if I just tried to describe to you what everything was doing here, I might as well just not even do the video at all, because it would be almost impossible to follow. Not because it's complicated, but because it's just one of those things that's better described as you're doing it so that we can get a clear understanding. So what I've done here is I've basically set up the lanes necessary to expand on my drop-off area over here. You'll remember I basically had this set up with this one liquid unloader emptying into this tank and I only had one tank cart basically on this rail. So now what I've done, I've set myself up so that I could have theoretically up to 5 tank carts, because I mistakenly added an extra liquid unloader down there. That was an accident on my part. I just wasn't really paying close enough attention. But realistically, I could have 1, 2, 3, 4 tank carts unloading at the same time, and then we could call this just an extra lane, for if I had an extra cart on the tracks, so that it could bypass all of the unloading points. Or, things got messed up, one of the tank carts could come down this lane and unload too. So we'll pretend that I did that on purpose, even though we all know that I didn't. And I know that if I don't illustrate what's going on down here, someone's going to ask, and it'll be a lot easier to just show you very quickly. These are the liquid unloaders, and I've got a wooden waterproof pipe connected to each one. The redstone engines, the ones that don't need fuel and don't explode, 2 connected to each wooden waterproof pipe, down to stone waterproof pipes, because that's what I had on hand. Normally I prefer gold waterproof pipes, but in this case I'm not producing a ton of creosote oil anyways, so stone is, it's fine. It's not a big deal, and it's going all the way down here, collecting from all of the liquid unloaders, and then sending them around to the far side of the tank where I've got another valve, just because I didn't feel like digging out the other liquid unloader, the original one, and replumbing that whole thing. So it's, it's sort of a mashup, but it's just for illustrative purposes anyways, and I didn't want to, see, I gotta stop breaking these things, because the switches have to go in certain places, unless, no, that won't work. I guess we'll just have to replace this track. It's not a big deal. Where's the dirt? There's the dirt. So we'll just cover that up. It just, oh my goodness, it's been another long day. There we go. We'll do that. And then we'll just take a track. We'll replace it, and everything's back to normal. So, before we get into the mechanics and what we need to actually make this happen, we need to look at the tools that we need for all of this. And these are all important. First of all, is the crowbar. We already talked about that. just in case you forgot, or I know I covered it very quickly. 3 iron, 4 red dye that you get from red flowers. Nothing expensive. When you're setting up just a really simple, more or less linear track like what we've got for our test track here, crowbar isn't hugely important. But when you're setting up switches, like switch tracks and different intersections and things of that nature, the crowbar is actually really, really huge because it allows you to adjust the orientation of the tracks on the ground without having to pull them up and, try and reorient them based on how you're placing them. So you definitely are going to want your crowbar for something like this. And then the other two special tools are the signal block Surveyor and the signal tuner. Now the signal block Surveyor, which never, ever, ever wants to come up like that. Signal block. Signal. It's this guy here. It's not complicated at all. It's a compass, which is 4 iron and a redstone, a glass pane, 2 stone buttons, which are just stone, and that's it. Signal block Surveyor. You absolutely need one of these if you want to be doing this kind of control traffic thing. And then the other thing that you will need is the signal tuner. It's a little bit more elaborate. A redstone torch, should know how to make those by now. 2 more stone buttons and a receiver circuit. Now if you look at that for the first time, it's a little bit like what the hell's going on, because it's a lot of materials we don't use a lot of. There's sand, which is not expensive. Slime balls, which you've seen my collection. It's not hard to get slime balls. Lapis lazuli, redstone gold ingot, and the redstone repeater. 2 redstone torches, a redstone, and 3 stone. Now, I just want to point out now, when red power 2 is added, there should actually be 2 repeater recipes, or 2 redstone repeaters, that you'll be able to make. And you always want to double check the recipe, like if you're making, something like this, where it's a component in what you're making, make sure you're making the right one, because this is the vanilla Minecraft redstone repeater, and the red power one is completely different, and they're not interchangeable. So just keep that in mind. That's the one we want to make our signal tuner. And these are also tools that have no durability, so once you make them, you basically got them for life. Just tuck them in a chest when you're not using them, and they're there when you need them. And so what we need to do, basically, first of all, is I've set up the basic elements of the track. These are all just your very, very basic tracks, right? We've made those. There's nothing complicated about them. And I've left these open so that I can illustrate exactly how sometimes the switch tracks work for you and sometimes they don't. And these are holding tracks, which we've also looked at those in the past. Advanced rails we've done, pressure plate, wooden rail bed, redstone. So there's nothing new about that. And these are the ones that the liquid unloader controls. You don't have to hook up any kind of wiring to it. It'll automatically, stop carts and let carts go and give them a push or whatever without you having to worry too much about it. So what we want to do now is we want to install all of the switch tracks, which are the ones that will make carts go around the corner or, straight across, whatever, depending on whether or not the track is closed or opened. I saw that guy and I just knew if I left him there, he was going to jump me or make me do something stupid. Hey, die. There. That was awful. These guys are they were hanging out in the pool, but now they see me, so they're going to be a problem. So this is where I like my arrow card, is I wouldn't have to worry about these guys. They would kind of try and sneak up on me, and all of a sudden all I'd hear is pew, 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 pew. And then they'd be dead, but no. Alright, so that's all clear. Let's get some switch tracks in here. These are pretty easy to orient. They're not complicated at all. Now this is exactly what I wanted to show you guys, because what I want is this thing to be set up so that it'll either let carts go straight or curve around this way. And you can see that this is completely wonky. Like right now the way it is it will let carts go that way, or they will let carts from this phantom rail over here come down that way. It's not at all useful to us. So you can use your crowbar to pull it up really quickly, but actually first you can right click on it and you can see it'll change orientation, but it'll only flip-flop 2 ways. So that orientation is not going to help us at all. And I've tried and tried and tried, tried standing in different places. And once it's basically decided that that's the only way it's going to put a switch track, your options are kind of limited. But what I've found is it just break one of the intersecting tracks and try it again, and you can see it still doesn't want to cooperate. So you break another intersecting track, and you can see it still doesn't want to cooperate. But this might be a good time to try with a straight track. Nope. So then what we can do is we can try this. You just want to break up the tracks so that when you put down the switch track, it's only connecting to one straight track. And that's basically exactly what we want there. So now all we have to do is hope that it doesn't flop around. There we go. So that's exactly how we want it. So that is exactly what I was hoping would happen, so that I could show you guys rather than having to try and describe it, so that you can see if it doesn't go down in an orientation you can use. You can just basically fiddle with it by breaking up the tracks around it until you've got it facing the direction that you want. So when I was testing this earlier, these guys all went down without any difficulties. So that's good. And then this one here, I noticed it was doing that previously as well. And if you know it's a switch track in your hand and you put it down and it goes in straight like that, usually the next time you place a block, you'll notice that the track will correct itself, and it won't necessarily be oriented the way you want, but it'll at least be showing that it is in fact a switch track. So these guys, we just right click so that they're going the other way. And then we can just sort of fly up with the jetpack, and you can see it's really, really simple. What it's doing is it's basically, you know, this is the primary lane, and if there's a cart there, it'll be set up so that it'll be routed around to this lane, and if there's one there, it'll be down this lane. So it's not complicated at all in terms of looking at it and figuring out what it's going to do. And it's not even complicated in getting it to do that. It's just what I found with the wiki is that they use all the technical train terms, which make absolutely no sense to laymen like me. So I kind of had to fiddle with it before I understood exactly what was going on. So what we want to do is we want to set up these guys here. These are block signals. This is, to give you an example, these are called block signals. And when you set them up and get them working, they delineate a signal block. So the block signal makes a signal block. And then you've got all kinds of other things, and it's very, very easy to get confused very, very quickly. So these are block signals. These are a device that you can make. They're not really expensive, but they're unique recipes. You don't come across recipes like this all that often. So for example, you've got your ink sac and 2 iron ingots. That's nothing complicated. Then you've got your signal lamp, which is 3 glass panes. Lime dye, yellow dye, red dye. This lime dye is made with green dye from cactus and mixed with yellow dye. And then you've got the dandelion yellow, which is from yellow flowers. This is from red flowers. And you've got glowstone and redstone. Makes your signal lamp. And then you've got, where did it go? Control circuit, which is, again, you know, that's the ugly one that kind of just changes orientation depending on what you're doing. But not really expensive, just kind of different. So it might take you a little bit off guard when you first come across it. So now what we want to do is we want to set up so that these block signals, make sure that's what, yeah, block signals, are detecting what's going on a particular length of track. Now the rules for this are, it has to be a perfectly straight length of track, and there can be no breaks in the track. So if I were to take out one of these tracks here, I wouldn't be able to, you know, set up a block signal for this whole length. As well, I can't set up a block signal that monitors what's going on around this corner as well. It's just the straight lengths of track that you can monitor. And if you want something more elaborate, then you have to set up more of these little black boxes and, you know, hook them all up and do all that. So let's just get the first one in place here. I'll show you what it looks like. Now you can see they've both got red flashing lights, and in this case what that's telling you is that they don't have any friends. It's sort of what it's telling you. But the logic that these use for detecting where they're going to start monitoring and where they're going to, you know, carry on from is they first check directly in front of themselves. You can see there's a track there, so we're good. If it doesn't find a track there, it looks up to 2 blocks in either direction to the side. Now, I'm sure there's situations where that might be beneficial for more advanced users. For me, I just want the front one. So that's the first one it checks for, and we're good. And so while we're doing that, we might as well set up the rest. and we'll get them in place, and then we can talk about how to make them actually do something useful. Alright, so basically what we want to do is tell these guys that we want this guy and that guy to work together and tell us what's going on this particular length of track. So the way we do that is we take our signal block Surveyor, and you'll notice all of these guys right now still have their green flashing light. So we right-click, or sorry, the red flashing light. We right-click on that guy, change it to a yellow flashing light. And you see also in the chat log, beginning signal block survey. And then you right-click on that guy, and it says successfully defined signal block. And you'll notice now these guys now have green lights on them, which is telling us that, you know, so far so good. So now we want to do the same thing with each of these. And it really does pay, guys, to keep an eye on your chat log when you're doing this, because if something isn't working, it'll give you a message with a hint as to what's going wrong. And it can save you a lot of frustration if you're just starting to get the hang of it and you're not quite confident in how things work and you're making a mistake. Don't overlook the chat log. That's something that I used to come across in MMOs and all that other stuff, and it used to drive me bonkers. Like, the information is directly in front of your face. Make use of it. It's just making your life easier. So that's my tip of the day. So these guys are all good. They've all got friends now. They're all paired off. They're all monitoring a particular length of track. So now we have to set them up so that they'll actually do something with that information. So first thing we want to do is, now when I say monitoring what's going on a particular length of track, basically, is there a cart in between these two block signals? If so, is it stopped? Is it moving? Is it moving towards one of these guys? Is it moving away from one of these guys? Like, there's all kinds of information you can draw from it based on what they call the signal aspect, which we'll see when we put down one of the control boxes. It's kind of advanced. As far as I'm concerned right now for this demonstration, we're just wanting to know if there's a cart on this length of track. And if there is, then we don't care whether it's moving, stopped, moving closer, farther, whatever. We're just, is it there? Yes, good. All right. So what we want is we want one of these guys with which is a switch motor. Again, die, iron, piston, receiver circuit. But you don't want to confuse this with the switch lever. And I'll show you, because you'll be sad if you do. Here's a switch motor and here's a switch lever, and they look exactly the same. From what I can understand, the switch lever is something that you would use if you wanted to manually control a switch in the track. Right? So if you wanted to manually be able to pull a lever on the ground, you would have that lever next to one of these guys. When you pull your lever, this guy would manipulate the track, so it would open or close or whatever. This is the one you want. This is the one that you connect to a receiver to automate that based on the signals that it's receiving. And they're expensive enough that you don't really want to be dorking around making a ton of them that you're never going to use. So just go for the motor. Life will be good. What you want to do is you want to put one of these motors wherever it is directly adjacent to a switch track. So in this case, we want one right there because the switch track is there. We want one there, and there, and there. And that's good. Now, we don't need a motor for these switch tracks because they're going to do their job no matter what. Like, a cart coming this way is always going to turn left, and a cart coming this way is always going to go straight. So we don't need to be worrying about manipulating those at all. We just need to be managing these tracks and making sure that carts are routed either around or down into the particular lanes. So in order to do that, we have the signal receiver box, which is another one of these recipes with the crazy circuit. Again, not expensive, but something to keep an eye on. And you want to set these guys down directly adjacent to your switch motors. So one there. And you can see he's flashing red. They'll all be flashing red until we get them properly hooked up. Now, I'll just show you now when I was talking about like signal aspects and different colors. The receiver box, emit redstone on aspect. The aspect is basically the status of the light, which I'm sure a train enthusiast will come across and, you know, come along and specify the exact differences, making me wrong, and I'm okay with that. But in layman's terms, just to keep things simple, the aspect is what color the light is and whether or not it's blinking, right? So in this case, we're just going to leave that for now. But what we want to do is basically have these guys communicating with the receivers so that the receivers can manipulate the switches and control the tracks. So in this case, we will, in order to do that, we use our signal tuner. Now, depending on how complicated you want your setup to be and how familiar you are with Railcraft, which of these two signal block signals you select to link with the receiver will make a difference, especially if you're monitoring whether or not a card is approaching or, you know, moving away from or whatever. Again, for our purposes, it doesn't matter. I just go with the closest one because it's convenient. So basically what happened there is these guys are green and they say, okay, we're green. And he says, okay, I recognize that you're green. And then based on the rules that you've given me, that means that I'm supposed to send a redstone signal to this guy. And that's not true. So we want this guy to emit redstone on aspect anything other than green. So if anything is going on this track other than all clear, this guy will route around this track. Now we want to do that for the rest of it, only the aspect will be slightly different. We go right click, and you'll see again in your chat log, it'll tell you what's going on, and you'll also see this guy takes on the color of the block signal that you just paired with it. Right, so those guys are paired. And those guys are paired. Okay, turn green. Turn green, you're making me look bad. Block signals successfully paired with the receiver. There we go. I'm sure it would have been fine. It just needed a little bit of time to catch up. So the way this is set up now, I think is good. Except, yeah, because this is basically all clear, and the way this switch track is set up, anything that comes along will go down this way. When these go to yellow or red, this will close, and anything else will be routed around this way and automatically sent down here. When this goes to yellow or red, this thing will open. Any other cards will come around here. So I think that's good. Now, all that's left to do is test it. And to do that, hopefully. Now, I set this up previously, the whole thing, and I had my arrow card on the track. And it just completely botched the whole process because the arrow cart is so much slower than these guys. So these guys would be, you know, hopping around. They'd pick up creosote oil and then they'd, you know, head over to unload and they'd smack into the back end of the arrow cart and then they'd stop. And it was just, I was running around pushing carts trying to get them back onto booster tracks till I finally said to hell with it. And basically just pulled the arrow cart off and said, you're done. You're done, son. So we're just going to put these guys onto the holding tracks. You can see I like this with the liquid loaders. It's got the little pipe that comes down and fills them up. I don't know, it's a nice little touch. Doesn't do that with the item loaders, just the liquid loaders. So now, I think it's still going to want to hold them until they're full, just based on the way the liquid loaders are set up, but we'll find out in a second. Yeah, so all you have to do is toggle hold empty. Basically turning it off so that it'll release the carts. And then if we run, we should see them. Yeah, you can see they're basically routing around to where they can each unload their shenanigans. Beautiful. And then that guy goes... Oh, I can feel a traffic jam coming on. So that's it. I mean, that's... I hope I didn't make it seem more complicated than it is, because it's really not that bad. It's just, again, one of these things where I don't think you'll ever feel comfortable with it unless you actually sit down and say, you know what, I'm going to spend an hour on this, and if it doesn't work, I don't care. Like, don't attach any expectations to it. But once you do get it working, you can see the benefit to it. Like, imagine having a setup in the nether where you've got some pumps pumping into one of these tanks, pumping lava into one of these tanks, and then just a network of tank carts all lining up and grabbing lava and bringing it back to the overworld or wherever you want the lava and unloading it, and there's a traffic jam. So, I mean, that's one weakness in the whole thing, and I've kind of come up with some ideas of how I might be able to solve that definitively and not just a Band-Aid solution, and it would involve more... they're all completely screwed. You know, it would involve more receivers and actually control boxes and stuff, so that if there were any carts on this straight section here, it would hold carts at the end of each one of these lanes until it was clear, and then it would have an order that it would send them along. But, I mean, that's beyond what I was trying to do with this, so you'll kind of want to fiddle with it on your own and get a feel for how everything works. But really, all you're doing is saying, you're using these black boxes to say, watch this straight section of track, and then based on what's going on there, you can have these receiver boxes, have the motor guys control the switches to direct your traffic how you want it to go. So this, along with the ability to send carts through portals that has been going this whole time, is actually pretty potent. It's pretty powerful, and it's actually, for me, a lot more interesting than just ender chests and things of that nature. So that was a lot longer of an episode than I really wanted to do, but it was necessary. It was necessary. Next episode, we're actually just going to mess around a bit with Steve's carts. Have some fun. It's not complicated. It's not difficult to understand. It's just kind of neat. So we're going to do that. Probably won't be a long episode. And then I think that might be it until the release pack comes out. Red Power 2 is added. And then we're going to be going bonkers with all that crazy stuff. So if you like this episode and you survived this episode and you want to be notified when I add more episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, thanks for watching and take care.